I spent 10 years helping them protect their grandson. One handwritten page undid everything. Posted by you / deleted. I just got off the phone with a colleague of mine, a probate attorney I've worked with on and off for years. She's sharp, thorough, and level-headed. But even she let out a long sigh when I explained the situation. After a pause, she said, "Yeah, it looks like they accidentally revoked everything." And just like that, a decade's worth of planning evaporated into smoke. I'm an estate planning attorney. I've been doing this for more than 25 years. I've seen messy families, perfect families, greedy children, absent ones, and heirs who deserved better. But this case? It stings more than most because the clients did everything right. At least, almost everything. One small, cheap, completely avoidable misstep undid it all. Let me back up. Roughly 10 years ago, Harold and Linda walked into my office for the first time. They were in their late 60s, maybe early 70s. Harold had that quiet, measured demeanor you often see in retired engineers or military officers, someone who had spent decades making decisions with precision and didn't have much patience for fluff. He wore a tan windbreaker over a pressed plaid shirt and carried a battered leather folder tucked tightly under one arm like it was his security blanket. Linda, on the other hand, had a kind but tired look about her, with the sort of worry lines that come from a lifetime of caretaking and not enough sleep. Her voice was soft but resolute, like someone used to being polite but ready to fight if she had to. They didn't waste time with small talk. As soon as we sat down, Harold looked me square in the eye and said, "We want to leave everything to our grandson." I nodded slowly, waiting for the rest. "Not the kids," he added, voice flat and final. "Just Evan." Linda gave him a quick look, not out of disagreement, but to acknowledge the weight of what he had just said. Then she turned her gaze to me and explained further. "Evan lives with us. Has for most of his life. He's a good boy, smart, helpful, just different." Her eyes welled up slightly. "He has autism. Not severe. But enough that work. Regular work. It's just not something he can keep up with." Evan was 17 at the time. I remember they brought a school photo with them. He had sandy brown hair, big hazel eyes, and a crooked smile that radiated innocence. He looked like the kind of kid who'd apologize for bumping into a lamppost. According to Linda, he was a whiz with computers, had a head for numbers, and was endlessly kind, but he struggled with change, with loud environments, and with reading social cues. Holding down a job in retail, food service, or even office work just wasn't realistic. "He loves gardening," Harold said, a hint of a smile breaking through. "Gets up at 6 every morning to check the tomato plants. Tells me if the basil needs water. He keeps us going, honestly," Linda added. "But we're not going to be around forever." Then came the part that was harder for them to admit. They had 6 children, Evan's uncles and aunts, but not one of them had offered to help in any meaningful way. Not with appointments. Not with school issues. Not even with a phone call to ask how Evan was doing. Linda leaned in across the desk, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some of them don't understand Evan. Some don't care to. But we're getting older. And if we're not around, I don't trust them to do right by him." Harold nodded. "They'll sell the house, take the money, and dump him in some group home. Or worse." It wasn't just an emotional concern. It was financial. Evan was already receiving support through state programs, and they knew he'd likely qualify for Medicaid and disability benefits as he got older. But an inheritance given the wrong way, directly, outright, could wreck that. Too much money in his name, and the system would drop him. It wasn't a fear. It was a fact. So we laid out a strategy. A comprehensive estate plan centered around a revocable living trust that named Evan as the sole primary beneficiary. We used special needs trust provisions that ensured any distributions would be carefully controlled, not just to maintain his benefits, but to protect him from manipulation or even well-meaning mistakes. Evan wouldn't be able to access the funds directly. A trustee, one they trusted, would manage everything for his care. And just as importantly, we included a rock-solid disinheritance clause for the 6 children. This wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. Harold was adamant. I don't want anyone saying Mom would have wanted this or Dad promised me that. I want it in black and white that they get nothing. No ambiguity, I said, echoing their concern. No room for argument, Linda added. We're not trying to hurt them. But we're not going to sacrifice Evan's future so they can buy new cars and vacation homes. They nodded in unison. I made a note on the intake form, then looked back at them. Okay, I said. Let's make sure this gets done right. A few weeks later, they came back to sign everything. I remember how careful Linda was, double-checking every clause. Harold joked about how his kids would probably throw a party when they found out they were disinherited, until they realized they weren't getting a cent. We talked at length about funding the trust. They would retitle their brokerage and bank accounts in the name of the trust. For their retirement accounts, I explained they couldn't change ownership during their lifetime, but they could name the trust as the contingent beneficiary. That way, if the primary was unavailable, everything would flow into the trust. And the kids can't get their hands on it? Harold asked again. No, I said. The trustee you choose, someone outside the family, will be the one in charge. That person decides when and how Evan receives money, not your children. That seemed to bring them peace. A few years passed. They came in again, this time with a twist. Linda looked exhausted. Evan's mother has come back into his life. The daughter, Tracy, had been absent for most of Evan's upbringing. But now, she was calling more, showing up for birthdays, even taking Evan to lunch once a week. Harold was skeptical. It's only been 6 months. But Linda thinks she's really trying. They asked if they should name Tracy as a successor trustee. I advised caution. It's encouraging, I said, but I wouldn't recommend that just yet. Let's see if this holds. Consistency over time matters a lot more than a few months of effort. We also talked about long-term options. Specifically, creating a standalone special needs trust for Evan in case other relatives, if they came around, wanted to leave him money. Putting it into the main revocable trust could be risky for benefits planning. We decided instead to create what I call an IRA trust. It could accept retirement accounts as beneficiaries, offer lifetime tax deferral, and contain the magic language needed to protect benefits. They loved the idea. We drew it up, executed it, and I advised them to update the beneficiary designations on their IRAs and 401(k)s to name the IRA trust as the contingent beneficiary, instead of the original revocable trust. Another few years went by. This time, there was good news. Tracy had stayed in Evan's life. Not perfectly, but regularly. She helped take him to doctor appointments, coordinated with his Medicaid caseworker, even took a part-time job to be more available. And another one of Harold and Linda's sons, Andrew, had moved back to town. He wasn't Evan's parent, but he had stepped up in a big way. Took Evan to baseball games, drove him to therapy sessions. Just showed up, consistently. We think Tracy's proven herself, Linda told me during their next meeting. And Andrew, too. We'd like them to be the successor trustees. After long discussions and lots of detail gathering, we agreed. We updated both the Revocable Living Trust and the IRA Trust to reflect Tracy as first successor trustee and Andrew as second. That was 3 years ago. Then, about a year before my conversation with the probate attorney, Harold called me. He sounded annoyed. Linda says we need to change the trust to make it absolutely clear that the Vanguard money market account goes into Evan's IRA trust. I pulled up their file. That account is already titled in the name of your revocable trust. It'll be distributed according to the terms we've written. I told her that. Harold sighed. But her friend, Donna, the one who used to be a paralegal, she told Linda that's not how it works. I paused. Well, I can draft an amendment to make it even more explicit, but it'll cost around $250. Harold hesitated. We'll get back to you. They never did. Then came the call. Just a few days ago. Tracy. Her voice was thin and brittle, like a glass ornament hanging by a thread. Mom's gone, she said, barely getting the words out before silence filled the other end of the line. Dad's slipping fast. The dementia's getting worse. Some days he still knows who I am, but most of the time, he thinks I'm the hospice nurse. It took me a moment to respond. I'd always known Linda was the glue holding everything together, and the idea of Harold now adrift in a haze of confusion hit harder than I expected. I could picture Tracy in that moment, standing in her parents' living room, maybe surrounded by boxes, binders, half-labeled manila folders, trying to keep her grief buried just long enough to make sense of it all. I'm so sorry, Tracy, I said. I know how much work you've put in these last few years. Your mom always said you were the one person she could rely on. She sniffed. I'm trying to do right by them. I've been going through their estate planning binder, everything you helped put together. There's so much. Trust documents, powers of attorney, all of it. But then I found something. My stomach sank. The way she said something wasn't casual. It had weight. I found a handwritten document, she continued. It was tucked in the back, behind their healthcare directives. Looks like they wrote it about a year ago. It's labeled as a trust amendment, but it reads more like a will. I could already feel the unease settling in. Can you send me a scan? Already did, she replied. Just hit send a minute ago. It should be in your inbox. I opened the file, and instantly, I felt that same creeping dread I'd learned to trust after decades in this field. The handwriting was unmistakably Linda's, elegant, slightly slanted, with loops on her L's and tight, careful spacing. The kind of handwriting from someone who always dotted their I's and crossed their T's, except this time, she'd unknowingly crossed out her entire estate plan. The document started with the usual formalities, I, Linda Thompson, being of sound mind and disposing memory. I kept reading, scanning for substance, hoping, really hoping, this was a benign supplement or personal letter misfiled among the legal documents. Then I hit the line. I do hereby revoke all previous wills and trusts. I stared at the words for several seconds, blinking hard, as if they might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. There it was. No legalese. No ambiguity. Just a single, blunt sentence, one that, if taken at face value, dismantled everything we had carefully constructed over the past 10 years. I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly through my nose. Of course, they hadn't told me about this. Of course, they thought they were doing something simple, clarifying their wishes, making sure Evan was protected. They weren't trying to sabotage the plan. They were just trying to be thorough. Maybe a friend told them a trust amendment had to revoke all prior documents to be valid. Maybe they'd found some form online or tried to mimic phrasing they'd seen somewhere else. But they didn't understand what they were doing. In trying to clarify one small point, they had effectively burned down the entire structure. All the notarized documents, the witness signatures, the precisely drafted language, the layers of protection, weighed down by one sentence scrawled in black ink on a piece of printer paper. I wanted to believe it could be ignored, that a court would see it as a harmless mistake. But I'd been doing this too long to assume that. I immediately called the probate attorney I trust. Walked her through the situation. Sent her the document. She read it. I could hear the disappointment in her silence. I think you're right, she finally said. If a court accepts that language is a revocation, then the trust is gone. We're back to intestate succession. Meaning, once Harold passes, and it likely won't be long, everything they built, everything they wanted to avoid, is going to happen. All 6 children will inherit equally. Evan gets nothing. He's not on SSI or Medicaid yet, but he's close. That money could have been held safely in trust, dispersed carefully by people who loved and understood him, while preserving his benefits and his future. Instead, it'll be a feeding frenzy. The same 6 children they worked so hard to keep out of the plan will split everything. Tracy will fight for Evan. Maybe Andrew will too. But the others? Based on what I've seen, good luck. After I hung up with the probate attorney, I just sat there, leaning back in my office chair, staring at the ceiling tiles. All those years. Thousands of dollars in legal work. Careful decisions. Thoughtful revisions. Multiple trusts. Multiple signings. Trustee lists. Beneficiary updates. Coordination with banks. And it was all undone with a handwritten page and a half. I'm not even mad at them. I'm just heartbroken. They didn't want to pay me a few $100s to do it right. So they did it themselves. And now, Evan pays the price. This story was fictional, but it highlights some of the chaos that can happen in actual estates. If you want to plan your estate the right way, get your free ebook at www.estateplanning.ebook.com.